everyone, today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on AI and robotics. Specifically, the South Asian market, you know that we are going for the industrialization. Country like Bangladesh, we are second largest country for garments industry. India, they are also moving for industrialization, manufacturing and lot of things, and India also playing a major role. And beside that, if we see next 5 year economic trends, Japan, China, India, Indonesia. These are the countries playing a major role for economic developments beside USA. So USA has a lot of research and innovations. USA has a lot of scientific innovation. These scientific innovations will be helpful for emerging economy like Bangladesh, like India, like Malaysia. So Professor David Smith is an excellent speaker who always inspire us to develop the new community. Beside that, we are also planning to train our entrepreneurs in on field. So hopefully this year we can invite all of the great speakers from World Talent Economy Forum to Bangladesh. And we are collaborating with the Asanullah University. They also have 30,000 students. So it's a biggest collaborations for academy and industry. And by today's discussion, we can take a lot of industrial dialogue and industrial projects. Professor David Smith, what you want to share for today's session?
Well, Sharif, that's an excellent setup for today's topic, and particularly when you look at the two of the hotter topics that we have in our society today with AI and with robotics, and they have to go hand in hand. And particularly if you look at the broader way of how robots and things work. First, to kind of go back and talk about AI for a second, and then go to robotics. You know, AI is looking at it's a machine approach for perceiving, synthesizing, and inferring information. And it's done through things like speech recognition, image recognition, translation between different languages, which is part of the natural language process of machine learning. And it really is one that looks at all the different elements to be there. And artificial intelligence really got its very early start back in the mid 1950s and beginning to move forward where it has dramatically picked up steam in just the last couple of years and how it's going forward. I was lucky to have met and worked with some of the pioneers in this field like Herbert Simon, Doug Lynette, and quite a few others. And when I was an executive at the MCC Consortia, which was an industry consortia trying to advance the computer industry, one of our focus programs was artificial intelligence. And Doug Lynette was trying to advance what he called a common sense artificial intelligence system to go forward. And that's kind of where we are today. And some of the big things as you look at AI is how does it reason, how does it problem solve, and how does it use the tools to do that? And we've seen tools like with ChatGPT and others which have come out and really have helped advance AI going and being able to take it to places. When I go backwards and look at robotics, though, it is a group where it's the design, construction, and operation and use of robots, as you can tell. And it's the design is of the machines that can help, can assist humans, and can do work that's repetitive in others. And robotics really takes the field of mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, information engineering, mechatronics, electronics, biomedical, computer engineering, control systems, software, mathematics, and the list just keeps going on and on. Robotics is a very complex field that has been dramatically advanced through the use of artificial intelligence and is being brought to bear more and more. So there have been elementary applications of robots for decades now. Now we can think of the robot arms that are used in manufacturing an automobile, that are manufacturing airplanes and other things like that. But the recent advances in artificial intelligence, particularly in some of the machine vision and others, are leading to the emergence of really a very interesting and new class of robots. Uh, just this last week here in Austin, Elon Musk unveiled his first class of robots that were not manufacturing robots, but were robots that were designed to interact with humans and to do work and other elements around humans. And there's a lot of speculation where robots are going. One of the persons at University of California, Berkeley, actually came out recently and said, in the next 5 years, which I think is very, very optimistic, our households and workplaces will be dependent upon the roles of robots, and we see it now. Is there someone hammering in your background? There's sure a lot of noise. Is going to be dependent upon the role of robots and some of the conflicts and other things you see there. You know, people often go back to movies, and that's just one of the ways they get scared of robots. You see things like the HAL 9000 robot, which goes crazy. You see the Terminator robots, which try to destroy our society. And those are surely the extremes, but that gets us to the whole concept here that not just with robots, but with artificial intelligence as well, there's a really heightened awareness of what they can do, good and bad, and what are the ethical concerns of them doing that. And are we opening up a minefield that we're going to be there? And, you know, I remember the Jetsons with Rosie, their robot, handling everything. And I still, you know, in 2023, I'm still looking around and seeing where my Rosie is to help around the house. And, you know, you see it driven by images like that. Then you contrast that with a Terminator, and you're going, wow, is that really what we want to do? So this new class of machines are going well beyond what we see in manufacturing type robots. It's going beyond traditional bots, the chat bots and other things we see. It's going beyond the ones that are running pre-programmed motions. We're looking at a new class of robots combined with artificial intelligence that can see, learn, think, and react to their surroundings. That's a big mouthful there. So by using the AI tools, these robots can see, learn, think, and react to their surroundings. So really it goes beyond us programming it what to do. It is making decisions on what it can do and how it reacts to us. And, you know, we might not personally work with robots at our home all the time, but I can tell you, I've seen robots already. One of the things we've talked about when we spoke about COVID in the past is here in Austin, there's a number of restaurants who use robots to deliver food out to the table. You know, they have the waitress come and talk to you, or you go through a kiosk and do it, but then the robots actually will bring the food from the kitchen and put it on your table. Pretty simple, but it does increase efficiency from what the restaurants are saying. Another place you're going to see robots happening very quickly is you're going to see robots deliver, particularly drone-based robots, delivering medical supply to remote places. And you see there's a company in Africa and that is using a set of drones to deliver medical supplies throughout Africa. And you're seeing another company begin doing that in South America too. And just recently, you've seen it begin to be used in the United States. And very interesting there. We know that robots are very active in handling dangerous, repetitive warehouse functions, manufacturing functions, and you're going to see more and more of that going forward. But you're seeing them used in places like that, where they are replacing or augmenting humans. One of the new places I'm beginning to see robots, particularly human-looking robots, are in healthcare, where they're going and delivering medicine to patients' rooms. They're delivering meals to patients' rooms. They're moving inventory between different places, and for example, up to the operating room, to other patients' rooms, to exam rooms. And they're supplementing the human capital there. You know, it's not a good use of the nurse's time to go and necessarily walk down floors and floors to get pills to bring them back up, or to go and get supplies out of the laundry to change the bed sheets in a hospital. So you're seeing robots begin to be deployed for tasks like that. There's one of them that is used in Dallas hospitals that I've seen called Moxie, and it's really involved with helping move things around, and it's automatically like stocking supplies. And nurses that have used them are actually lowers their stress and gives them more time for the patients. You're seeing robots usage extend dramatically into agricultural as well, both external farms and we're now seeing more and more indoor farms where the robots can make a tremendous difference, and they can be either specialized or general. So, for example, one of the companies has a robot that can change. So, like one day it could pick tomatoes, the next day cucumbers and things, and you begin to see it change like that and working across the domains. But you know, we already see AI and machine learning and vision recognition, audio recognition things being used a lot in business. And we're now seeing it begin to apply directly to the robots that have the impact there. And, you know, again, part of the goal here is we know that robots can help automate tasks. They can automate tasks that are repetitive, dangerous, or they can automate tasks that are, quite frankly, so boring that it leads to human error. But you know, automation like this without the AI creates systems that cannot respond to variables, new environments, or changing requirements very well. For example, in an automobile factory or in a semiconductor fab, it takes days to reprogram robots to update them to new design features and others like that. But by combining artificial intelligence with robots, you create a smarter, and many times almost a completely autonomous system. And you know, with the machine learning, image recognition, the cognitive services, uh, the ability to be aware of the environment, you see that robots can learn and respond to these new environments. And particularly as we begin to look at some of the cognitive and generational type AI coming out, we know that we can begin to make robots smarter with capabilities like, how do I understand language? What can I do with image recognition beyond what my training is, text recognition? Oh, and also even translations and more. Uh, Robots do not have to be one language with the type of artificial intelligence we're using. And you're seeing more and more places where we now have robotic operating systems that are just like the operating systems we use on our computers. And that can really drive the intelligence of the robots and what they can do. We're seeing major corporations like Microsoft, Intel, uh, Google, Amazon invest very, very heavily in robotics and artificial intelligence out there, because we know it's going to help hold really tremendous promises for the future of humanity and what we want to do with the future of humanity. And so we see robots can be used coupled with AI from some of the simplest of tasks to some of really the most complex as well. And robots tend to work fairly fast and with accuracy. And we're going to see that impact the future of humans. I need to go and do some work in the yard later today and actually cut the grass in my front yard. I would love to have my robot go do that. And we're seeing that. And, you know, robots have been in the past, like I said, since the mid 1950s, really. But the last 2 decades really have seen a tremendous rise from ones used, like I said, in manufacturing, others to now household robots, and ones that can be used in healthcare and other places. We're even seeing some pilots now that's beginning to be used on airplanes. We're seeing robots used in hotels, once again, to deliver things to rooms and others like that. The delivery of things to rooms by a robot takes away one of the biggest risk factors for some lower paid workers as well, because that is actually a fairly dangerous job to use in many places. But we're beginning to understand the differences. You know, robots and AI is complex, it's challenging, but opportunity. Opportunity for innovation. The combining of these two, and particularly looking not just at general robots, but even very specialized robots, makes a tremendous opportunity for nations and for the entrepreneurship there to work in this, because it is a very rapidly evolving field with new advances every week. In these technologies we've seen in some of these innovations, they provide an insight to what is the future of human-computer interaction. And human-computer interaction is the intersection of robots and artificial intelligence. And even though these are distinctly different fields, AI and robots, they actually are different, and they have to work together to be successful where we're seeing going. And this is going to help us begin to move AI more to a general intelligence AI, where it's systems that emulate the human mind to learn, solve problem solving, and make decisions independently without all the decisions being programmed in. And that's what you want to happen there as you go forward. And where it's going to go. And, you know, a lot of the computing approaches are going to be very dependent on what you're doing. You've seen, for example, robotics being used in the oil industry quite a bit, particularly for offshore oil rigs, where the environment and the risk factors are extremely high, and where you want them to be running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Robots, while they wear out, they don't get tired, so you can begin to do that. So let me just, with that, take a second and talk about some of the biggest areas for robots. And one that they've been in for decades is manufacturing. And they're beginning to see these new enhanced robots being deployed in factories, not just for the repetitive tasks like riveting pieces of metal together, welding, moving parts over, for example, off an assembly line to be painted and moved back, moving doors into place and things. You're seeing them used in factories and warehouses today to improve efficiency and lower cost. And again, you're beginning to see a lot more of them being used where human workers might be at risk, such as mining, construction, and others. And you're seeing it even help create new products going forward. Another area where like for is healthcare, and we're seeing. I was fortunate to have been part of one of the first international robotics operations as a technology advisor, where a surgeon in Maryland, in the United States, was using a robot to do surgery in Singapore. Now, back then, we did not have all the high-speed networks we have today. So what we saw was we used multiple back then T1 lines, ES3 lines to get enough data to going back and forth. Then it was a very primitive operation. That was setting the stage for that type of facility. But where you're going to see more and more, particularly robots happen, is in hospitals, long-term care facilities. I can tell you long-term care facilities have a dramatic shortage of skilled workers, and robots could be a very good place there. Also, you're going to see places in healthcare, and particularly healthcare research, where the robots and the AI tools they're using need to analyze large amount of data and identify patterns that can help researchers better understand things, particularly where the machine vision and other have nuances, looking at different disease conditions and things. All across retail, you're going to see it working all across business. Anywhere where a robot can help increase efficiency and supplement for human resources that they cannot find. One of the big impacts of the pandemic is many of the unskilled jobs are going open and not being filled. I mean, I see even very few restaurants today that are 100% at staff. They have empty tables because they can hire people. Robots is one of the ways to do it. You're seeing robots begin to move into fast food, where they are cooking burgers, they're taking orders, and doing a lot of it. We talked earlier about robots delivering packages, delivering other things like that. So we know that a lot of new opportunities for things. And, you know, we're seeing the ROI of applying robots just be tremendously high. Depending on the type of robot and things, we're seeing huge cost savings. We're seeing on the order, and many of them, 75% productivity improvements. We're seeing really very rapidly return on investment. And that optimization is going to continue, I think, as you go. There's universities now who are offering whole degrees on how to take robots and not just do the manufacturing, but in all the other elements you have there. That to be really very transparent, robots and artificial intelligence do still have problems with cybersecurity. They still have problems with bias. They still have problems with how do you mitigate those? And there's increased regulatory pressures combining both artificial intelligence and robots. Both of them have the potential to take many jobs away, but then they're also creating jobs as well too. And so you're going to see regulatory actions, I think, taken in both robots and artificial intelligence occur very rapidly over the next couple of years. And it's going to be something that you have to really keep track of. But you're going to see really quite a bit of continued investment and AI and robotics separately and combined as you uh, try to make these work in different ways. Um, and part of the future here is that robots are already been in use, and they've been in use for decades. And so where the the fusion of robots, the fusion of artificial intelligence is just going to continue. We spoke on this program a lot about augmented reality. Well, augmented reality combined with robots gives you yet another new capability to talk about, and what you can do with them. So, Sharif, I've been going for a while, and I hope this is kind of the direction you want me to go. And there's still some more here, but let me let you direct me a little bit more. Let me get a bigger drink.
Excellent. Professor David Smith, I have to understand the specific question like how the more can join for AI and robotics development, and how we can some economic benefit through this process.
Well, Sharif, great question. Uh, we've talked about in the software realm, things like boot camps, specialized training are going to be part of the future of it. The same thing in robotics. I know here in the United States, in many of our tech cities, we have robotic labs that you can sign up for and go and actually work and build simple robots and experiment with others. Universities, colleges all have programs in artificial intelligence. Many of them have university programs in robotics. Great fusion points. Um, there is a regulatory impact, like we talked about still, and that's one that, particularly in developing nations, I think the regulatory environment is one that needs really careful consideration right now because the fact that some of the skill levels are not as diverse as you see in developed nations, the impact of robotics could be more severe for a greater percentage of the population in a developing nation. While on the other hand, the benefits could be very good too, particularly in dangerous work, risky work, or repetitive work. Um, and uh, I think you will see that happen. The other answer to your question, Sharif, is there are online excellent resources on looking at how do you program for robots, how do you use artificial intelligence for robotics. Uh, you can see with some of the different utilization driven by some of the generational artificial intelligence, like Bob, like Brad, like Chat GPT, and others. Uh, you're seeing the power that they can have and be used. Oh, and like Virginia is saying, the particularly when you look at research and the use of robots as a digital twin and others, you're going to see enhanced opportunities. And uh, robots can help with some of that modeling. I believe if I look, for example, in things like semiconductor factories, you're going to see increased use of humanoid types of robots used there and taking people out of that dangerous environment where they have to use bunny suits and self-contained breathing apparatuses and things, and where a speck of skin can cause $1 million worth of product defects. So I think you're going to see robots go there. I also Virginia brought up the area of climate change, and robots are going to be useful there as well. The other place I think you're going to see a good use of robot, and we saw this in things like the movie 2001 Space Odyssey with HAL, but he was a centralized AI tool. when we start deploying colonies to the moon, when we start deploying colonies to Mars, you're going to see heavy robot utilization there. You know, I send a robot out to work on the establishment, on the community, without having a spacesuit. I don't have to do the other elements around that. I don't have to worry what happens if my screwdriver punctures my spacesuit and all my oxygen starts going out. You know, a small micro hole in a spacesuit could leave somebody dead in less than a minute. And and so robots can help get around that in space. You know, if I look at the future of aviation, we're seeing more and more drones. The drone is a robot. We're seeing more and more drones deployed. And we're now seeing autonomous drones because of the advances in artificial intelligence. Uh, and we're seeing it used more in war. Uh, I every day I'm amazed at the new usages we're seeing of robotic drones, of robotic ships, of other robots being deployed in the Russian-Ukraine war. And Ukraine seems to be one that is innovating the most. But those are robots and they're enabled by artificial intelligence. And so you know, the ability to fly a drone to carry weapons or to be a kamikaze drone, plus another drone there to send the pictures back and help guide it to its target is something, you know, that 20 years ago they were dreaming about that, and yet it's possible today. And, you know, there is a lot that has to be there. And we have technology to grow, technology to use, but the one place I think uh, I would disagree a little bit with Virginia's comment that she made because I think there are still more frontiers. I think there's more frontiers that we need to deal with. I cannot wait for us to understand the cognition we have as a human and begin to take cognitive systems and apply them more. Yes, in artificial intelligence, yes, in robotics, but in so many different ways too. And you know, I am actually waiting for the day, and we now have some working models of robots powered by AI that are small enough that they can be inserted into the human body to do robotic surgery in situ in the human body. And and uh, that to me is another frontier that I am waiting to see happen, where you do not have to do the type of surgeries we use today in many instances, where we can, if there is a problem in the brain, just have a small robot, a micro-sized robot, go and deal it, and then exit the body when it's finished. Those are all some of the features of AI and robotics as well. And it's good seeing Mark here. Mark, I'll let you throw some things in it because I know you can dream.
Yeah, definitely a dreamer, big time dreamer, and all of that space. As you were talking, David, I was thinking about a couple of things. One, the robots can be, as you just mentioned it, a safety tool, and all in that space because the robots are a physical entity, but they are not a sentient being as of yet, and everything. So we can sometimes sacrifice them because, as I know, you are a student of history, and all along those lines, there was a time here in the United States in some of the early industrial day, particularly in places like West Virginia and stuff, where we actually sacrificed an animal and all in that space. There's a reason that there's that terminology, canary in the minefield, because they would definitely use the canary to go down there to test the air quality. And if the canary did not come back, then you knew that you didn't need to send the humans down because the canary had probably died in that process, and that's how that expression came about, as my understanding of that particular expression that exists in terms of people's risk and all of that. But in a lot of ways, it seems to me, and if I'm using the wrong terminology, please correct me, but it seems to me that definitely that would be an example of the robot being able to examine what is going on, whether it's in space, whether it's in the deep parts of the inner earth, or whether it's in the ocean or a number of other places that might be too risky for a actual human to go down. We can send the robot. We're even seeing that in some of the space travel. That's why some of the space travel is actually robot manned or manned by others than humans, because we don't know thoroughly what is up there. So we send other uh, technology up there to explore and to send back pictures and all in that kind of way. So that is my understanding as a non-scientist, but a journalist of that aspect and everything. And you were right. I heard you talking about the college kids that have robots and drones. Guess what? It's not just college kids in the West, because I know here in Durham, North Carolina, a dear friend of mine, Renee Daughtry, does a program called Asymmetry, and he is actually using that company, which is his company when he's not a Cisco engineer, to teach young kids between the ages of, I want to say, as young as 6 or 7 on up to like high school age, how to code robots, how to make robots, and how to even fly drone planes, because he also has a business partner of his that is a drone pilot. So it was very fascinating about a month ago seeing those kids get out there and fly those drone planes and all along those lines. So that was a very fascinating part of the conversation. And as you said, many folks can have drones and can explore the drone technology and along those lines. So it's very fascinating. And just about anybody can own a drone. So if y'all hold on 1 second, I'm actually go off camera for 1 second and all along those lines, but I'm still going to be talking and all in that space. So I am still having the conversation and still bringing up stuff and all along those lines. But I had to reach and get what I had and all along those spaces, because yes, anybody, David, anybody can own a drone. I even have my own drone as well. So as you can see, there's my drone and all along those spaces. So yes, anybody can have their drone and all in that kind of way. So I do have my drone here in the house, and I can have it fly around and do all of that kind of stuff. I won't do it because I don't feel like knocking off kitchens and computers, and it might even need a battery charge. But definitely, there is a drone here in the Markley house and all in that space. So yes, Sharif, you can get a drone as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, Sharif, it's been a good session, and there's a lot that can still be said about it, because you see it. One of the interesting statistics Forbes lately is they believe that robots could replace over 800 million jobs globally, and about 30% of many of the occupations being taken over by robots. And there's also, when you look at artificial intelligence, there's a percentage I saw recently that only about 10% of business aren't looking into using artificial intelligence. And I think with all the press on that, you're seeing it going. And, you know, we just need to understand the regulatory impacts, the privacy, the cybersecurity impacts on that, and how they're going, because AI and robots, like we said before, are conceptually different, but they're reinforced at the hips, because robots are just hardware, and it's the software and then the AI combined with that.
Hey, David, I heard an interesting conversation.
The task for robots. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I said I heard an interesting conversation on a show yesterday, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts about this are. Speaking of robots and the technology that is out there, but on one of my other shows yesterday, I had a gentleman that is in the area of resume development and all in that space. He's actually in Canada, but he was talking about unusual jobs that existed. And one of those unusual jobs involves technology. I don't think they have it in Malaysia yet. It might be coming to Malaysia, but apparently, because there are so many people that are so absorbed in technology that they forget common sense. So they don't know where to leave that common sense in place, and they are walking into the streets and causing accidents and all of that. So one of the jobs that I asked him, one of the more unusual jobs that he had heard about was the job of a spotter. So apparently there is a person that's running around in the United States that literally will spot you as you are walking to make sure that if you're doing technology and you're absorbed in the technology that you don't forget to do something common sense oriented, like walk into the middle of a busy highway. So apparently this is an actual job where people will literally spot you and make sure that you don't run into the streets if you are busy with your Oculus set or a number of other things. So you're over there in the West Coast, as I remember correctly. So I just wondered if you had heard anything about those kind of jobs in your neck of the woods, because when you told me this, I was going like, this can't be a real job, but apparently it is a real job.
Well, or Mark, I'm actually on the third coast. I'm in Texas.
Texas, right?
But don't put me on the West Coast. No, there are those, but there's a practical application in that too. One of the companies that it was formed here in Austin, and it was after the IBM Watson project kind of began to break up a little bit, called Spark Ignition. And one of their product sets is using AI, machine learning, machine vision recognition and things to look out for people on factories. You'd go in a factory floor and you'd see the red tape around a machine, but people weren't looking down at the floor. So this artificial intelligence robotic-based system does that for you. They use it on oil facilities to help provide safety and things. In addition to robots doing the work, they have them looking out for the humans as well too. I see so many people being dumb, looking at their smart device and not aware of what's around them. It's good there, but you also see that even though people are saying, I love what Virginia just said, even though people are saying that robots are replacing a lot of jobs, they are. But what most people don't say is robots are also creating, artificial intelligence is also creating a whole new class of jobs, and usually higher paying jobs too. You've heard me, Mark, you've heard me, Dr. Sharif, talk about the fact that we're in a time of lifelong learning. And this highlights the fact that that need for lifelong learning is very, very important. One of my mentors that I was with, Dr. George Kosmetsky, he co-founded Litton Teledyne, dean at UT, got the President's Award for Technology, brilliant guy. Back when in the 70s, early 80s, he would say that the average human during their life would go through 7 career changes. Well, that number, if I were to put that today, and he upped the numbers, he lived until probably about a decade ago. I would say the average human today is going to go through over 30 career changes during their life. And that just highlights the need for lifelong learning. And Sharif, particularly as I look at developing nations are ideally suited to instill in their population the requirements for lifelong learning, the requirements to understand that the technology life cycles where things are getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and that the learning pace increases. I mean, how many people a decade ago thought such a high percentage of healthcare would be delivered by telehealth? How many people thought that instead of using medicine, we would use your own body's immune system to go treat diseases like cancer and others like that? How many people really thought that we see augmented reality used to help build buildings. Looking through a pair of glasses instead of reading a blueprint to do things like that. Not many.
No,
Same
David,
thing.
there
How
were
many
probably
people thought you of commercial companies you have today launching things into space? Those are things that lifelong learning helps enable, and governments can help facilitate that. Sorry, Mark, but go ahead.
no problem. I was just going to say that there were probably some people you said that I am somewhat of a dreamer, to borrow the song from John Lennon and everything. And that being said, it's oftentimes the dreamers that had that kind of notion and everything. I have not read a lot of them lately, but I have been historically a fan of science fiction and science fiction novels and movies. And a lot of the things that you were just mentioning were envisioned, but they were envisioned not necessarily by the common man, but by the science fiction writers, and some of those things have come to reality, including the cell phone, including some of the computer technology, including some of the other things that are out there. We don't quite have the uh, Jetson robot made yet, but it's probably on the way and all in that space. I mean, in terms of mass consumption and everybody having access to it, I know that they exist, but they are not mass consumed as of yet. But that's probably on the way. And in a little bit, everybody, instead of having the little vacuum cleaner robot, they will have an actual modeled as a human type of robot, much in the way of the Jetsons. It hasn't quite happened yet, but it is probably en route at some point or another. So that's just a matter of people's imagination being allowed to roam and to accomplish these things that can definitely be done in that space. I did have a quick question for you and Sharif, because I do know that there is I'm of the opinion that some of the quicker jobs to be automated will be the jobs that people don't like to do in the first place. So we know a lot of people are, even though it's a very needed job, there are a lot of people that are not exactly rushing to be the sanitation workers, because it is a very messy job and a very spooky job and all in that space. And I know that there are probably not that many people rushing to be, because we just completed one round of the NBA semifinals. So I don't know that there are a lot of people that are rushing to be referees and all in that space. Or if you're in another country and you're playing cricket, they have umpires as well. So I don't know enough people are rushing to be in those positions. But hey, maybe instead of the human being out there and getting possibly hit, as was recently the case, inadvertently by LeBron James, there can be robots out there. Because I mean, are you really going to argue with a robot if it tells you that you traveled as much as you argue with a fellow human being? I don't know if LeBron would be as up to arguing, or the coaches, with the robot as much as they might be with the fellow living human being. But what is your thoughts about this notion of maybe we'll have robot referees after a while?
Well, that's part of what instant replay tried to do, and you can still argue with instant replay. So I'm not for sure we'll see the differences anytime soon, because it's always the angles, right?
Right.
And it's the same thing with data. It's always the different angles there. And Dr. Sharif, it's like come back and kind of wrap part of AI and robotics up. Governments have a role here.
Mm-hmm.
Governments can establish centers of excellence, and particularly in developing nations. One of the things I keep thinking back of is the program we did on the mangrove stuff, very popular in your part of the world. Those are difficult to work in, hazardous for humans because of the different animals there, the different blackish water and things. Robots and AI combined might be an excellent one there. Beginning to look at some of the other areas we're seeing where there is, for example, in part of Asia, there's still places where there's minefields left over from decades ago, where robots would be a great one to begin to go work in hazardous places like that. But government has in most of what we talk about, the technopolis place there, where government has a role here. Academia has a role. And academia in this role starts early in academia and not just research universities. It has that role. the whole commercial sector, from the big companies to the individual entrepreneurs, they're going to have to help transform and make this all possible. And when you look at robots and when you look at artificial intelligence, but then you combine them with the human spirit and what humans want to do, it is a tremendous opportunity for innovation. And I believe the next huge area of opportunity globally is going to be around speed of innovation and combining robots with artificial intelligence with imagination and innovation. You will see the speed of innovation pick up, Sharif. And luckily, that is not going to be confined to developed nations. That's going to be a global experience where developing nations, because they do not have all the legacy systems, probably have an advantage over developed nations. And so, Sharif, I think that's probably my concluding remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Markley, what's your concluding remarks?
No, I think that we've definitely touched on a lot. Automation and the robotics are going to be a very important part of the future of mankind. And definitely there needs to be relationships between those in what are considered the first world and the second and third world countries as well. I know that some of my friends that are in the African American community have been reaching out to some of their friends in some of the African nations to figure out how to build allegiances and alliances between those communities, because there is oftentimes some common heritage that exists in that space. And so a lot of the folks that are of African American descent during the slave trade were coming from Africa and all in that space. So there is conversations about how to reach back and build those alliances. And I see we've got Virginia on here, similar kind of efforts between the Latin community and some of the actual Latin countries. So that is something that we definitely need to have, is continuing conversations, because I am a big fan of collaboration across cultures and across nations and all in that space. I think that many of the great leaders of our time and even historical times, that was one of the things that they actually were very much proponents of. A lot of people don't know this, but Martin Luther King, and I want to say even Malcolm X and some of those that were more radical, were big proponents of trying to make sure that we had a relationship with other parts of the world and continue to build those relationships. So I'm a big fan of collaborations across the nation divides and all that. I know a lot of the countries have become very nationalistic, whether they be on one continent, be it Asia or Africa or even Europe or even the North and South Americas. But I find that the best efforts that are going out there from many of our corporations are those that are transcending those kind of divides and actually working together. So that will be what the part of the concluding remarks that I will make is that we need to work together to find ways to bring the technology that we have here in the United States to places like what Sharif has over there in Malaysia, and to work with the students, whether they be in Malaysia or in Brazil or a number of other places, and to start at a young age. Because I did mention that the kids that are learning about drones and robotics here in Durham, North Carolina, are as young as, I want to say, 7 or 6. And you just can't believe the fascination when they realize that they can learn these skills at such a young age. And I imagine it would be similar for the youngsters there in Malaysia, Brazil, and other parts of the world.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. I request all of our audience, please share our content with the government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Mr. Markley, and thank you, Professor David Smith, for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.